Hello and welcome into yet another edition of the PHNX D-backs podcast. Of course, you know, I needed some excuse to check in on Jesse and make sure he's doing okay in Milwaukee. And so far, things look great. Of course, I am your mayor of PHNX here in Phoenix, sometimes even known as the mayor of the city of Phoenix myself, Derek Montilla. And this, of course, is the one and only Thunderstick and my vice mayor, Jesse Friedman. Jesse, Cogs is right. What a view behind you of American Family Field.
Yeah, I wish I could get these windows opened up. I'm pretty sure
it looks easier than it is, right? It's not easy.
I think this ballpark is me and like 4 custodians, and that's about it. It's an utter ghost town. It's honestly really weird being in a major league stadium at nighttime and it just being dead silent and like not super late at night, right? Like it's not like it's midnight. You know, that happens all the time when as reporters we're like writing our post-game stories and all the fans are gone. This is just like a empty baseball stadium at 8, 9 o'clock at night. So a bit of an odd experience over here. but yeah, we are here in Milwaukee.
And again, I know where you're coming from, right? Normally there's other writers. You got Steve Gilbert and Nick over there. You have all sorts of guys there. Usually have the grounds crew out there pounding away at the ground and making all sorts of noise at Chase Field when they're doing that stuff. But there go the lights behind you. We're losing the lights behind you. That's spectacular. That timing couldn't be better. But
before they were testing out the LED lights, and it was honestly it was quite a show. They had orange and purple and they can do all sorts of fancy things with the lights, but I guess that includes just like turning them off entirely.
But hey, those lights might go out, and that might be good for the Arizona Diamondbacks because the Milwaukee Brewers will be without a key part of their starting rotation.
Yeah, I mean Brandon Woodruff's really freaking good, man. That's an enormous loss for them. I think he had a 2.28 ERA, something silly like a whip under 0.9, like 0.82 or something like that. It's a huge loss for the Milwaukee Brewers. We asked a number of different D-backs about it today. We asked Mike Hazen, Torey Lovullo, Christian Walker as well about how they felt about that. And I mean, they're not going to come out and rejoice, even though deep down they might be sort of relieved. They don't have to face Brandon Woodruff. They made comments about how, it's not great for the game when something like that happens. They certainly feel for him as a person not getting this opportunity. But yeah, for the Diamondbacks, this is a big development. I mean, the pitching matchups didn't look fantastic. They didn't look terrible before, but they didn't look great. The first game is still going to be tough with Brandon Pfaadt against Corbin Burns tomorrow. But that game too, suddenly you're looking at Zach Gallen against, we don't know what the
Wade
Brewers
Miley?
are going to do at this point. Yeah, I think we asked Torey Lovullo sort of what his guess was. His guess was that Freddie Peralta would be moved up to game 2 and then Wade Miley to game 3, or potentially vice versa. But yeah, I mean, Brandon Woodruff is, I mean, you could make a case he's the best starting pitcher on this Brewers team, a Brewers team that is very, very good in that regard. And this is a huge loss for them, not only for this series, but, if they are able to move on, this could really have big implications for how far the Brewers are able to go.
We don't want to think about that at all. We just want to think that this is ultimately what's going to lead to their demise. But there's obviously old friend Wade Miley. That's kind of interesting in the concept, in the idea that we might see him and what that could mean. But obviously this greatly impacts the Diamondbacks' chances of winning this series. The Milwaukee Brewers, the one thing that we discussed them having is a trio of stud pitchers that is arguably better than most teams' best 3 pitchers, right? You could put them up there with the best trios in baseball. And right now that starting rotation is one of the best. There's no secret as to why they're ranked so high in ERA. Even their relief pitching is good. We talked about that on today's show in our At a Glance segment. They are second in all of baseball in their ERA for relief pitching. But I mean, this just really does feel like now that one of the things that they really had an edge up on, especially according to your article that you wrote on gophnx.com, that this kind of levels the playing field a bit when it comes to the pitching advantage that the Brewers have.
I think a lot of it depends on if this series gets to a game 3. I mean, like I said before, it's still Corbin Burns against Brandon Pfaadt in game 1. That's tough. If the Brewers do opt to move Freddie Peralta to game 2, he's still a really, really good pitcher. He's been one of the best in baseball over the last couple months. Yeah. That's still pretty tough. Even with Zach Gallen on the mound, that's still a pretty tough matchup. There's a chance you might not really feel the real effects of Brandon Woodruff not being here until game 3, when the Brewers might be forced to go with a Wade Miley or one of their other starters. And frankly, Wade Miley is still pretty good in his own right. He's not Brandon Woodruff, but he's still it's remarkable how well that man has aged. But yeah, I mean, it definitely helps the Diamondbacks. There's no question about that. This is a big benefit for them, and we'll see if they're able to take advantage.
I still have my concerns definitely about the offense, but the Brewers offense is not very good. So, I mean, when we were having that age-old discussion now, which I felt like we had a half a dozen times about who would we rather face, the Phillies or the Brewers.
We should talk about it again, Derek. I think we should start from the beginning.
Let's not. Let's not. Because I took the Phillies, and honestly, that doesn't feel probably like the right decision now. The main thing that I can see here is at least the Diamondbacks have been fairly decent at times in close games. We know that they haven't been able to generate a ton of offense, so you didn't really want to go up against a team that could potentially do that. Like, the Diamondbacks just haven't been great in slugfests, and I feel like with the way their offense has been performing lately, that could be demoralizing right out of the gate in a first game that causes them just to be out of the series, from the get-go. I feel like, at least the Brewers aren't that offensive threat. They're not that as potent of an offensive team, and I feel like that at least makes these games close. But a lot of it, I feel like, relies on that first pitching matchup between Brandon Pfaadt and Corbin Burns. We talked about the two different sides of Corbin Burns that the Diamondbacks saw this year. One outing where Corbin Burns was outstanding for the Brewers against the D-backs, and one where the Diamondbacks absolutely put it to him. So we're hoping that it's the latter that we get in tomorrow's game.
He's been pretty good lately. I mean, Corbin Burns in the second half has looked more like himself. I don't know if he's ever been, quite peak Cy Young level Corbin Burns this year, but, his down year is ending with 200 innings and, an ERA in the low 3s. So he's done all right for himself. But yeah, to what you were saying earlier about the Brewers offense, I do think it's important to note, and this is something I emphasized in my article, in the month of September, the Brewers offense was significantly better than the Diamondbacks offense, despite what those season numbers would tell you. I think the D-backs had an 86 WRC plus in September, 100 being league average. The Brewers were at 106. They scored about 1 run more per game on average than the Diamondbacks did in the month of September. And another thing I uncovered is if you go back to about the midway point of the season when the Brewers and D-backs had both played about 80 games, at that point, the Diamondbacks had scored 101 more runs than the Milwaukee Brewers. And if you look at where things stand right now, how many more runs the D-backs scored than the Brewers at the end of the season, it was only 18. So what that tells me is that the D-backs offense was way better in the first half, and the Brewers offense was actually way better in the second half. They scored about 80 more runs than the Diamondbacks in the second half of the season. So it's hard to know what to do with those numbers, right? I mean, do we just look at on the whole season, from the whole season perspective, the D-backs do have a better offense, but yeah, I mean, especially with how bad the D-backs offense looked in the last few days of the season, doesn't necessarily bode well coming into this series.
Well, I did want to remind everybody out there that a big way to support this team and support this offense is to go get our brand new wagon shirt over at PHNXLocker.com. It's a fantastic way to get on board with that. And also get yourself a PHNX Diehard membership. Of course, you can get that wagon shirt for free as part of that Diehard membership if you sign up now. Not only will you get a free piece of merchandise from the PHNX Locker, you'll get 20% off future purchases, get access to our members-only Discord lounge, you get all of Jesse's content, you get all of our wonderful content over at gophnx.com. Again, the Discord Lounge, best place to be an Arizona sports fan. Discounts with our partners and so much more. So drop that like Gabby says, by the way, while you're here. We do appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much for joining us for a special emergency podcast, if you will. It's more of an emergency update. I guess this would be more of an emergency podcast for the Milwaukee Brewers, because this is a big deal for them, missing out on one of their key starting pitchers. And according to reports, it sounds like they don't know, like you said, if they should they advance past the Diamondbacks, they don't know when they're going to be getting Brandon Woodruff back. So this is a big loss for them. But yeah, of course, if you're here right now, make sure to subscribe to the PHNX Sports YouTube channel, sign up for notifications. That way you don't miss whenever we go live. And yeah, smash that like button. Leave us comments. We want to hear from you guys. Obviously, we know Jesse is there in Milwaukee. They're shutting the lights on him, down on him. There's somebody that's going to come around soon with like a broom and kick him out. I feel that coming.
I think we're getting pretty close to that.
Yeah. But you were there today for the Diamondbacks workout, and let's talk a little bit about the Diamondbacks side of things. I will say, and I confessed this on today's show, and I will continue to say this until hopefully they prove me wrong. But I have all the concerns in the world. I have all the anxiety in the world about the Diamondbacks offense, because they have not performed well lately. And to be honest, one of the things you and I have discussed is that they have made mediocre pitchers look very good at times lately. I can only imagine what could happen here in this series against some of the best pitchers in baseball.
Yeah, it's a fair concern. And that's something that we talked to Mike Hazen about as well. And yeah, I mean, there's no great answer for that, right? I mean, you'd like to believe, if you're the Diamondbacks, that those last few days are just kind of a mirage, and you're going to go through cold spells over the course of a 162 game season. There have granted been kind of a lot of cold spells over the last couple months in that regard. But yeah, I mean, this team hasn't really hit recently, didn't really hit in the final week of the season. And they're banking on a switch kind of flipping here in the playoffs, right? Which is a big thing to bank on. Like it seems a little too easy. Like you're going to, you're not going to be able to hit when you don't need to. And then suddenly when the pressure is really on, when you're in, not necessarily a do or die situation in game one, but when you're in a very high leverage situation, are you suddenly going to be able to have, the at-bats that you need to have? Are you suddenly going to be able to bear down and come through in those big moments? The answer is that nobody knows, right? The Diamondbacks don't know, but the way that they're viewing this is that was just kind of a weird thing at the end of the season. Obviously, they didn't really play their starters in the Sunday game. So I think there's some legitimacy there to that game not really mattering a whole lot. But there's no question about it. That's maybe the biggest question heading into tomorrow is this offense going to figure things out?
You had some video from Mike Hazen, and I'm not sure if this was in regards to this topic or a different topic.
Yeah, we have a few different things. So yeah, there's a couple Mike Hazen videos that we have. The first one that we'll start with, which I'm hoping is the top one that producer Damon has. Hopefully we're on the same page here. Mike Hazen is talking about something that I asked him was, how do you view in retrospect not acquiring a starting pitcher at the trade deadline? The Diamondbacks are in a position right now where they did make the playoffs. They ultimately did not need that extra starter in order to get where they wanted to get to. But now that they're here, it's Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, and then, you hope Brandon Pfaadt looks good, even though he's thrown fewer than 100 major league innings. D-backs don't really have any other clear options after him. So, yeah, I asked Mike Hazen that today, and here's what he had to say. How do you view that in retrospect?
I said at the time I was disappointed I didn't acquire a starting pitcher. So, yeah, the cost we had to weigh versus what was being asked for. And I think I said, look, taking Alek Thomas off the team, that would have been the cost in some cases. And I didn't want to do that,
For control.
Yeah. And in some cases for non-controllable guys. At least the ask, and yeah, there were other permutations and there were other choices we could have made, not just that. Yeah, I wish we had acquired a starting pitcher. We had set out, that was one of the things we wanted to accomplish at the deadline. And I didn't get that done. Yeah. But we're here in a series in the playoffs. We have 3 really good starting pitchers. I think our bullpen is certainly much better than it was at the deadline. And that's a weapon in a playoff series, to have 4 to 5 deep in your bullpen. that you feel really good about running out there and shortening the games up, I think that's also a way of attacking in the playoffs. Like most playoff starters aren't going as long as they used to go anyway, and it becomes a bullpen game in the 5th and 6th inning much more than it used to in the past.
And honestly, I think he's right. Like, I know that they're in this position now, and I know they're not in a great position as far as their starting pitching goes, but do we really want to sacrifice Alec Thomas not being on this team for potentially one of those guys? Like, I don't think so ultimately. And I think that, especially when he says non-controllable guys, fuck that. Like, fuck that all the way off. Like, but I'm not trading major league talent for a guy that's non-controllable. But I mean, even for the idea of some of these controllable guys, I have no idea who he's talking about. But I mean, maybe Lucas Giolito was one of these guys. Maybe some of these guys were some of these pitchers that really didn't pan out after all was said and done. And you look at what their performances was like after the trade deadline, we would be furious as a fan base for a guy to have a 9 ERA with us after we traded away Alec Thomas in order to get him.
And that's kind of what I keep coming back to as well, is that, sure, on paper, the Diamondbacks maybe should have gone and done that in retrospect. But if they had, I mean, look at some of the starting pitchers that were moved at the trade deadline and how they perform with their new teams. Yeah. Lucas Giolito, as you just mentioned, an absolute mess. Jack Flaherty, was not particularly great with the Baltimore Orioles. I think Jordan Montgomery was good with the Rangers. He's kind of one of the few. So, yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe the D-backs would have traded Alec Thomas for a starting pitcher and then not made the playoffs because that starting pitcher suddenly, just wasn't able to perform in the second half. So, yeah, you can see there from what Hazen said, it's kind of this dichotomy where on one hand, yes, I wish I had acquired a starting pitcher. Like, we could clearly use that right now. But on the other hand, the cost to do that was extremely high. And even now that the Diamondbacks are in the playoffs, now that they really have a shot to go and do something, it's still not clear at this point if you would have went out and wanted to trade Alec Thomas for a guy like that. Who knows, if that would have actually moved the needle at all in the end.
Yep. And you have more from Hazen in regards to just how he feels about the team being here at this point in the playoffs.
Yeah, this is his initial comments in the press conference, just about how he feels going into a big 3-game series here in Milwaukee.
How do you just kind of feel if you were dying for three games?
Yeah, I feel great. I feel great that we're here. I feel great that we're playing in the playoffs. Whatever the situation or dynamic surrounding it is we're here to play and we're here to win. And 3-game series can be great for us if we win the first 2 games too, so I feel great.
I agree. I also feel great, and we should all feel great. When all is said and done, nobody is going to give a damn how the Diamondbacks got here. No one's going to go back and be like, remember when they got swept in that last series against the Astros? Like, no one's going to say that because the Diamondbacks are here. And no matter what happens in the playoffs, even if they don't beat the Milwaukee Brewers in this first, wild card round, the fact that they got here is a huge accomplishment. The fact that they are here when so many other teams are sitting at home or on vacation is an accomplishment. And not only did they deserve to celebrate it, because that's something we talked about on today's show, some of those people being like, should they really celebrate it that much when it, was kind of a backing your way in? And we're like, yes, they did. Yes, they absolutely did. After a 162-game season, playing in a tough division like the NL West, they absolutely deserved to celebrate the fact that they are one of 12 teams in the playoffs. And I think Mike Hazen should be damn proud of what he has been able to do with this organization, considering everything that they've gone through over the last 5 years.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you said it well. I mean, if you're Mike Hazen, it doesn't matter how you really feel, about your chances of beating the Brewers in this series. You still feel great because the Diamondbacks are a playoff team and they already have exceeded their expectations. And yes, it was a little ugly. They only won 84 games. They kind of backed their way into the playoffs. They have a negative run differential, as well as the Marlins. Something I tweeted yesterday, the Marlins and the D-backs, those are the first 2 teams to have a negative run differential and make the postseason. barring the 2020 season, since 2007, when the 2007 Diamondbacks somehow won 90 games and won the NL West division, even though I think they were minus 20 that year. And that team, Derek, if I remember correctly, that team swept the Cubs in the NLDS and then got swept in the NLCS. That was back when the Colorado Rockies were, an actual formidable baseball franchise.
Remember that? Remember those days?
It feels like
not
a long
really.
time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
But yeah, the D-backs have backed their way in. It's not ugly, but you can understand why Mike Hazen has a very positive outlook on the situation.
Well, that's not the only video we got. We also have somebody that's the subject of a lot of discussion when it comes to game one, and that is Brandon Pfaadt. And Brandon Pfaadt obviously has a lot on his shoulders here, a lot riding on Brandon Pfaadt's start out there. It's kind of wild considering how many discussions we've had about him being part of the starting rotation. And then this season came along, and he's here. And now he's starting in a playoff game, and it feels like all of this stuff happened really fast. We got Jordan Lawler here, Brandon Pfaadt starting in a playoff game. We got all sorts of craziness. So what did Brandon Pfaadt have to say?
Yeah, this is Brandon Pfaadt just talking about, the honor that it is to be in this position to start game one and how he originally heard the news.
It's kind of an honor. They told me that when we were celebrating in the clubhouse, and I was kind of like, let's go. Let's give me the ball. Then we get to Gallon game 2, and I think we're looking good.
It was just like mid-celebration. They told you that?
Yeah.
Strong.
Yeah, heat of the moment, it was Hazen. Kind of just a lot of emotions going on. So in the heat of the moment, he told me, and it was even more exciting.
That's incredible. He's just, getting champagne poured on his head, and Mike's like, yeah, baby, by the way, you're starting in game one. Get ready, son.
Yeah, that was the best part of that whole interaction. Brandon Pfaadt talking about that. He also, we don't have this clip as of now, but Brandon was also asked just about how he expects the nerves to be in that start tomorrow. You'd expect them to be pretty high for someone in his shoes. And he said he was actually more nervous for the press conference that he was doing at that moment than he was for the start tomorrow. He said he's not much of a public speaker. The press conferences are not his favorite thing in the world. But yeah, he sounds confident going into tomorrow. I also asked him at another point, in those early days of the season when things were really tough, could you have foreseen back then that you would be starting game one for the Diamondbacks in the postseason? And he said, absolutely. He did no hesitation. He said, absolutely. He did say, granted, you probably would have expected Zach Gallen to get the ball in a game one or Merrill Kelly rather than Pfaadt, given, how great those two have been. But yeah, I think he's always had some internal belief that he was going to be able to turn this thing around. And it hasn't always been pretty. I mean, there was still that start in New York, just a little over a week ago at this point, where he gave up a few home runs. But he's looked better in the second half, and the Diamondbacks are putting a lot of faith in him going into tomorrow.
Dogging him is off the charts with that answer, Jesse. And honestly, that's an attribute we hear a lot from coaching staff in the front office about Brandon Pfaadt. I've even heard people say that at times he's eerily calm, like they almost expect some nerves out of him, and he is just very steady. Obviously, that's a great trait for a starting pitcher to have, and especially in this situation, it's a great trait for him to have. It's hard to believe, right? It's hard to believe that you don't have some nerves going into a game that's this important, arguably the biggest game of your whole entire career. So I don't know. There is some suggestions from Elizabeth that you TP Giannis's house while you're there. So
yeah, send me his address. I'll get right on that.
I think these are creative. These are definitely good ideas. And I mean, I don't want to be attached to if this happens or not, but of course it's fun. And also I know that the guys looked like they were having, I don't know, the guys in your videos, everything you kind of sent has looked like the guys are loose, like they're having a good time. But, I know that you talked to Zach Gallen, Christian Walker, and Corbin Carroll, and Zach Gallen had some very glowing things to say about our young stud there in Corbin Carroll.
Yeah, let's this is Zach talking about, I think it was a year ago when he was kind of trying to figure out, who's the next great Diamondbacks young player. And I'll let him say it. It's pretty cool.
I joke about, Corbin. I think it was 22. We'd played Bobby Witt, and unbelievable player. And I joked, I'm like, where's our guy? And they're like, he's coming, don't worry. Corbin has been Corbin since he got here. So just, having faith in little things like that, and just, it's been cool to see for sure.
Where's our guy? He's here. That's it felt like that at times with the Arizona Diamondbacks. You know what I mean? Like even with some of the good players we have had in the past and some of the good playoff teams, like Paul Goldschmidt, he was our guy, and there's not been a lot of our guys on this team, Justin Upton, our guy, Paul Goldschmidt, our guy. Obviously, I know Luis Gonzalez for years and forever will be our guy, but Corbin's just different. There's something special about him that feels like he's having already a career that's, just different, special, unique. And it is because he's the first player in MLB history in his rookie season to go 25-50.
Another crazy Corbin Carroll stat that I discovered yesterday, which I'll probably do a full story on this and kind of some things around it pretty soon. Fangraphs has this base running runs above average stat, and Corbin Carroll leads the majors in that stat this year. And he has like twice as much as the next closest competitor. It's not even close. And you can actually do a search for this stat. It's still the data from years and years ago. They were still able to use that in order to calculate this stat for guys who played 100 years ago. And I think Corbin's number was like the fourth highest of all time. And no one had gotten there since like the 70s or 80s, something like that. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's not just that Corbin Carroll stole 54 bases this year. It's that he got caught 5 times. I mean, his success rate was over 90%. Another thing that I discovered while I was nerding out on StatHead yesterday, as I do, is that Corbin Carroll, granted, this one's a little bit cherry picked. Corbin Carroll is the first player in Major League history to steal 54 or more bases and be caught 5 or fewer times. No one has ever reached, quite those levels of efficiency that he has reached this year.
Do you just mean in baseball history? You're not talking about their rookie year. You just mean nobody's ever done that.
Yeah, I mean, just nobody's ever done that, because guys used to steal way more bases than they do now, right? I mean, You can find guys who stole 100 bases in a season pretty easily, but yeah, they're caught like 20 times or something like that. The degree of efficiency that Corbin has had this year, combined with all of the other little things, all of the other ways that he's wreaking havoc, the infield singles and, kind of getting defenders to make mistakes that, some of these numbers might not account for. It's really remarkable. I mean, he's the best base runner in the sport by a wide margin, and he can hit too, right? He's also no slouch up there. He's not just hitting, slap singles everywhere. The guy also managed to hit 25 home runs this year. So yeah, I mean, we're going to be talking about this rookie year for Corbin Carroll for a long time.
Bigger concern for you in game 1, Corbin Burnes or Brandon Pfaadt?
Bigger concern in game 1?
Yeah. Brandon Pfaadt's performance on the mound for the Diamondbacks, or Corbin Burnes holding the Diamondbacks hitters, kind of quiet there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think probably Brandon Pfaadt. I mean, like I wrote in a story the other day, there aren't a lot of major league teams that are going to hand the ball to a 24-year-old rookie with less than 100 innings and an ERA almost 6 in the playoffs. Like that's just not something that teams often do. The D-backs are frankly backed into a little bit of a corner here because they have Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, and Madison Bumgarner obviously didn't pan out. Zach Davies didn't pan out. Those other veteran options just didn't really work out. And so this is kind of where they are at this point. And it's a big question mark. He seems to be confident. The D-backs seem to be confident in him, but there's no question that he's had some rough moments this year, and this is a really, really big stage for someone in his position to step into.
Yeah, again, we talked about it on the show today, but the April 11th outing against the Diamondbacks, Corbin Burnes, 8 innings, 3 hits, 0 earned runs, 0 walks, 8 strikeouts. The outing in Milwaukee on June 19th, 5 innings pitched, 8 hits, 7 earned runs, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts. Hopefully that's the Corbin Burnes that the Diamondbacks get tomorrow. And maybe, I think I still have my concerns about the offense, but maybe the time off, maybe, just being here in the playoffs and really having nothing to lose, right? Like, I mean, I feel like the pressure really is more on Milwaukee here to not get beat by the third wild card team and to not lose yet again in the playoffs when they have this solid rotation that they might not have for too much longer. So like, it just feels definitely like the pressure should be more on Milwaukee, and hopefully the Diamondbacks can view it that way, especially the hitters that kind of can tend to press too much in the big pressure situations.
That seems to be the perspective that most guys have. Like the pressure is on the opposition. The D-backs can come in here. No one's really expecting anything of them. If they even win a game in this series, like some people are probably going to be pleasantly surprised. So yeah, in a sense, there's not that much pressure on them. Torey Lovullo also said when I asked about this the other day that, on the flip side, you don't want to go too far with that mindset. Because then you can just kind of put yourself in position to get run over if you're just kind of playing so carefree that you're not really dialed into the situation. So
just happy to be here.
Yeah, exactly. There's a limit to that, and I think the D-backs are mindful of not crossing that boundary.
Yeah. Well, Jesse, I know you're there in Milwaukee. I'm sure they're going to kick you out soon, so I will go ahead and wrap this up, but we will definitely have more from you in Milwaukee tomorrow. We will have our pregame show, which starts at 3:30 here in Arizona. I believe that is 5:30 in Milwaukee. I don't know time zones very well. I almost thought that this show was an hour later than it was because I thought we were closer in time, but make sure to join us tomorrow for the pregame show, and then we'll be back 10 minutes after the final out. Jesse will be there with interviews from the clubhouse and more from Torey Lovullo, and we are going to cover this wagon as efficiently as we can throughout this entire playoff process. So hopefully Jesse and I have some long nights and a lot of work ahead of us covering this team in the playoffs, because that would be too sweet. But again, you can follow us on Twitter. I'm at @cap_caveman with a K. Make sure to follow Jesse at Jesse and Friedman. Again, he's going to have all of your updates from Milwaukee. You can follow our account also for all your updates on Milwaukee. That's at PHNX_D-backs. But of course, all roads do lead to at PHNX_sports on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Go get yourself this wagon shirt. Support yourself a wagon. This team is a goddamn wagon, and they are on a roll. We are going to circle the wagons here in the playoff, and we are very excited about that. So make sure, grab yourself that shirt. Die Hard, you get 20% off. If you're a new Die Hard, you can get that shirt for free as part of your Die Hard package. So join us today over here at gophnx.com. And of course, like I said, support this wagon. We appreciate you guys for joining us tonight. We thank you guys so much for loving this Arizona Diamondbacks team. And remember, kids, baseball is fun, but it's so much more fun when one of the most formidable starting pitchers in your opposition's lineup is no longer available. Let's go.